Welcome to All Things Esoteric Podcast. Good evening, and I welcome you to podcast episode 20 on the Egyptian Goddesses. Hello, Anthony. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good.
Good to be talking with you and recording.
Yep, it's been a while.
Yeah, we keep saying that, but we're just flowing with our lives and what's going down in our neck of the woods and just trying to get through it, actually, to be quite honest with you.
Shit happens.
Man, I got a lot going on personally in my home. Just, been through those transits. We've been talking about it, but we'll get through it. And in the meantime, words can be both kind and true. Okay, well, hey, before we get started into the December 2022 astrological sky, I want to just say I was previewing our Mercury video. It was one of the first ones we did. And all of a sudden, as I'm listening, I hear Anthony say, I have to take a piss. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't edit that out. I missed it. So sorry, guys. I would take the video down and re-upload and fix it, but then it loses its algorithm and all that jazz. So it just, I guess it humbles us. Hi, Anthony.
Yeah, no one's listening to the early ones anyway. That's how it is with every podcast.
Well, we refer back to them because sometimes to really get an idea of what we're talking about concerning really whatever we're talking about, you sometimes need other layers. And that was one of the reasons we started with the layers of the planets.
Yeah, we may have to re-record our foundation just because that audio, but there's good knowledge there if you're willing to go through it.
Yeah, the audio was bad. We apologize for that. It's been a work in progress with my internet challenges and all that. Yeah. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into December 2022 astrological sky. There's a condensed version of this. If you're interested in learning more about December astrologically, I can invite you to check out the link in our description box of this episode to my newer YouTube channel, The Crone's Nest. Look for the playlist Astrological Monthly Snapshot. And these monthly forecasts cover significant movements, cosmic shifts, and moons, especially the moons, whatever's happening with the moon there. Knowing these dates and the energetic signatures is helpful. Why? Because if you know these dates, you can use them in your own solitary practice, in your own magic. And it is no accident, after all, that the kings of old consulted the learned sky sages when choosing dates of marriage, children, planting, building, festivals, strategic planning, and especially for waging war. So it's no joke that energetic signatures are a certain way at certain times. So I open with some information on quadruplicities and triplicities from the book A Cosmic Science, the classic work on spiritual astrology, chapter 6, page 53. I do not own this information. And I'm reading this because we open up the December 1st, when we opened up December 1st, Skymap, it was a 73% mutable acting chart. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to read this for you here real quick because I love the way that she breaks this down. She says the signs of the zodiac are divided into quadruplicities and triplicities. The quadruplicities are aspects of force manifesting in matter. There are 3 basic modes of energy, and there are 4 signs in each division. So basically, you have cardinal, fixed, or mutable. And cardinal signs are active. The fixed signs are using the will and its latent, stable energy. And the mutable signs are harmonizing, adaptable, and often the wisdom signs. So with our chart coming in at 73% mutable, it tells us at the end of the year, there's great opportunity to button this up, to shift and move and set the intent for the new year, to perhaps take advantage of Mars in retrograde, which is quite challenging as it sits next to the moon at 16 degrees Gemini, in this full moon in Gemini. It's quite challenging on the 7th as we see it there, but there's a huge opportunity for us to deal with our emotional patterns and to finally look at them through the year and how we've been behaving and how we've been acting and our ups and our downs and our waxing and our waning with our speech, especially, and to kind of say, okay, let's go in, let's redo, let's relearn, let's be retrospective, and then let's move forward. So a lot more to be said there, but again, please go listen to the fuller description on that. I went into it pretty deep, but the energies are going to be flowing and working together if you choose. And the reason I say that is December 1st did open with 40 squares and 7 grand crosses. And the squares and the grand crosses are considered challenge aspects. I've talked about this before. The squares are 90 degrees, and these are 2 energy points that really don't work well together at all. And at times, you've just got to say, this isn't going to work. Can't do it. I can't work with this. I've got to walk away. I thought I could fix this. I thought I could overcompensate with one side of the equation, but neither want to meet in the middle with that 90-degree square. So I think that it's really important to look at the squares in the December chart and the opposites, because that is where the challenges are going to be, and they are all falling in mutable signs. So the hard news is there's a lot of challenge, but the good news is the energies are able to get you moving and flowing, because mutable signs are very easygoing and tolerant and open and free-flowing. And this is Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. The other thing that I want to bring up is Neptune is getting ready to go out of retrograde, and Neptune has been in Pisces in retrograde for a while, and it's going to be stationing forward on December 4th. We also open Jupiter in Pisces right next to Neptune at 29 degrees, and this is considered a very potent degree. The degrees matter in astrology deeply. Often we just look at signs or planets and aspects, but we must look at the degrees. I think there's another hidden layer there that's deeply significant. So at 29 degrees, everyone's been talking about this. Jupiter turning and going into another sign. And it's going to go into Aries, and it does very well in Aries. It can move out and do things in Aries. You've got Aries, which is cardinal fire, and Jupiter, which is mutable Pisces or mutable Sagittarius. So it's energy that's wanting to go out and really make some changes. And Jupiter is the benefic, known as the great benefic. So it's an opportunity for us to take, since Neptune's coming out of retrograde right next to Jupiter, take the higher manifestations and be cardinal about it. And take a look at that moon, December 7th, with Mars right next to the moon at 16 degrees. I highly advise, when in doubt, don't, guys. This is a very volatile full moon. There could be some serious explosive conversations that you will regret. So with Jupiter wanting to bust out in Aries there at 29 degrees, Jupiter wanting to change and go into Aries, which is already a highly cardinal sign, it's considered, this is a very, very powerful opportunity for deep change within us. So I wanted to bring that out. Also, again, this Mars in retrograde business that is going to finally station forward January 23rd, 2023. It retrograded October 2022. So Mars co-rules both Aries and Scorpio. And again, it indicates this planet's courage and ability to take action. But Mars deals with our desire nature and aggressive drives. And in retrograde, it doesn't like that very much. It cannot move forward, and thus that agitation on that full moon. But it will move past, the moon will move past, and eventually Mars will station forward. But until it does, it's in Gemini. So any Geminis out there, 16 degrees this month, you're really going to feel this. That is what the degree of Mars and the moon are at this full moon. With the Pluto return, jumping ship over to Pluto here quick, making reference to the USA chart. If you listened to prior podcasts, I've been talking about this. We're certainly seeing, with Pluto moving forward, even more changes with our money systems. I think everybody kind of knows it's on the horizon here. Economic change, how we use our resources, the money sectors of the USA, with Pluto returning in that second house of fixed Earth, Venus-ruled house, and manifesting Taurus themes here, we are really going to see significant change as Pluto plows forward. Pluto will move out of Capricorn into Aquarius. This is huge. Everyone's been talking about this as well. It's been in Capricorn since 2008. It's a big deal. So with Pluto moving forward into Aquarius, we're going to see many, 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 many Aquarian themed changes tied to the planet Uranus, which is sudden shock and awe. Aquarius's planet is Uranus. Some say also it's Saturn. It just depends on what branch you come from. I put him more with Uranus. I have a hard time with Saturn. I kind of keep Saturn with Capricorn. But if you've been experiencing challenges with what you sense you should do with your life, okay? This is 10th house matters, where Pluto's been in Capricorn. This is your career and your job and the role you play in society. If you've experienced significant changes in your workplace and what you do to make money to survive, this is all part of this Plutonian process coming to an end. Now, for some, the changes in their journey and path, they've been clear. They've been really easy to see for a number of reasons, probably good mental and physical health. You may have had role models. There's support around you. You've got family love, other close relationships, examples to guide you. And you may have had some really good aspects in spite of what has gone down. So this is why people may not feel things at the same level as other people. Others of you, it's been quite a different story. And without that essential and legitimate need during times like this for nurture and guidance and love and that daily care, it can be really dysfunctional quickly. You begin to break down. You begin to break down internally, your systems break down, then your outer supports break down, your health breaks down, your mind thought processes break down, and you can find yourself in a really, really tough place. Pluto and Capricorn in the 10th is utterly transforming the way we do things for a living. And that can be very, very difficult, especially if you're the breadwinner and it's all on you. So by April 2024, we'll see a completely out of Capricorn. So we have until 2024 till this is moving forward. Another thing I want to talk about is Saturn square Uranus. Been talking about that a lot because it's been very, very challenging. And Uranus went into Taurus in 2018 and will clear out by 2025. Saturn's been in Aquarius since March 2020 and will move forward to Pisces in March 2023. So we're seeing a lot of change and shiftings coming next March, guys. So if you can just hold on, the next quarter is going to be a lot like Jell-O. It's going to be a lot of shifting and moving and juggling until we finally set into a newer rhythm. With that, I want to quickly go over the new moon in Capricorn. And this is going to bring in, from all that mutable, shifting, changing energy, working those squares, it is going to bring in more stability. This occurs December 23rd, 2022 at 4:07 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. What I want to bring out about this new moon is that it is in the sign of Capricorn, and you've got Venus that has moved into Capricorn and Mercury that has moved into Capricorn, and they're all tucked together there. There is some degrees of separation, but they're all in the same sector of the sky working together, where you've got Venus, our relationships, our love, how we communicate what we love, our relationship to it, and Mercury as well, wanting to share and connect with the sun and the moon. There's a great opportunity to have taken that energy I was talking about that was so in flux and now grounding it and saying, okay, December 23rd, going into January 1st, 2023, the clock's turning on Saturn, on this earth, the way that it works here. We go by calendars. So you have to assimilate into this time frame where it's going to be really difficult. And we go into a new clock. We go into a new year, and it's a whole new vibration, guys. And so take advantage. There's a lot going on in that Capricorn new moon, but December 23rd, 4:07 a.m., a great day to do magic. Great day to set new intentions. And I go into that deeper in video. December closes out a little bit more quieter going into January. I'm looking forward to new energies coming in. So I will definitely also let you know Mercury, do you want to mention this, goes retrograde December 29th. So if you have any communications, that's funny, it's December 29th, right? Right before the new year. And we've been in Gemini with this full moon this month, asking us with Mars there, how are you speaking? So with Mercury going retrograde, it's going to be a relooking at those conversations. And perhaps communication won't move forward as quickly as you'd like it. Not a good time to start new projects. Make sure you've got everything buttoned up before that retrograde, before you start anything, and just wait until mid-January when it's getting ready to start to release before you start to do anything. All right. Anything you want to add, Anthony?
Yeah, recently and in the near future, the sky seems especially potent, like lots of various combinations of energies colliding, like more than usual. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, and it has been very, very significant, and there's no doubt about that, especially all the changes that we've just seen directly, specifically with the United States and our economy. And it's those outer planets of Uranus, Pluto, Saturn, I would even consider more further out there. It's a bridge planet, but Neptune, doing their work out there and utterly transforming. And we've seen this if you go back and you look at skies when planets have been in these positions and timelines and what was going on, it's very obvious that these shifts in energies occur, and we're on some kind of wheel, you guys. We're on a system that keeps going around. I guess when you leave your suit, when you leave your avatar, right? That's when it ends.
That's a whole other episode.
Right. And I mean, do you go right away into another one? You go back to school? Where do you go? If anybody has those answers, please comment.
They're out there.
Let us know.
There's different paths.
I'd love to learn. I hear lots of different paths, that's for sure. All right, so Egyptian astrology. I wanted to throw this in really quick because as we were preparing for the Egyptian goddesses that we're going to get to in just a moment, I was like, oh, wow, I came across a bunch of stuff. And I came across Egyptian astrology. And I want to tell you, I have never heard of this in my life. And I was fascinated. So I'm not going to go into it deep, but it is done a bit differently. There are still 12 signs, but they assign more sections to a person where there are one or more signs instead of just one sign. But at the dawn of Egyptian astrology, this is from belowthestars.com, temple priests accurately monitored and recorded the movement of stars and planets and tried to understand their effect on the Earth's environmental changes. They predicted famines and floods based on solar movements. The arched ceilings of the ancient Egyptian temples were designed to imitate the heavens, and all the rituals were scheduled based on planetary activity. Bam. So if you want to walk like an Egyptian, be like an Egyptian, they do a lot of their rituals, well, it says all, on planetary activity. So the solstices and things like this that we do, it's all tied into the planets. So the last ancient dynasty who ruled lasted from 305 to 30 BC, and Egyptians borrowed the Greek zodiac designation system and assigned Egyptian gods to each zodiac sign. The ancient Egyptian calendar was close to the calendar we use today, like the Gregorian calendar. It was a solar calendar. However, the year had 365 days and consisted of 3 seasons of 120 days each. The seasons were divided into 4 months of 30 days. You might have already calculated that that's not enough for a 365-day year, and you're absolutely right. To make up for the remaining 5 days, ancient Egyptians added a 5-day month, which was treated as outside of the 12. The 12 months were usually numbered within each season, but were sometimes named by their principal festivals. So I just wanted to mention that. I thought that was pretty cool. You can go see what your Egyptian sign is and kind of compare it with your Western sign or your Vedic sign. It's just exciting that astrology shows up all over the world in different ways, but yet it all goes, many paths, one teacher, many paths, one God kind of thing.
And even more interesting, as we go through the goddesses tonight, to people familiar with Western astrology, those archetypes are going to be jumping out at you, as you will see.
Exactly. And in closing, I'll hand it back over to you. This is from Ancient Healing, Unlocking the Mysteries of Health and Healing Through the Ages. And it's got a whole section on Egyptian medicine. And what this did for me is it kind of brought me into their world. Because as Anthony and I were discussing, this isn't, unless you've taken it as an elective somewhere, you're just not taught about Egyptian history at all. It's just not on the table. You're taught Roman and other mythological, the Greeks and things like that, but you're really not taught anything about Egypt that I remember, and anyone that I've talked to. But they had healing deities, and they very much connected with the ones that we're going to be covering tonight, which was Hathor, or Hathor, I've heard it pronounced different ways, Sekhmet, and Bastet. I wanted to read this really quick. And this is from Religion and Health, page 31. The ancient Egyptians believed that each person was a product of different spiritual elements. Each person had a Ba and a Ka. Ba, often translated as soul, vivifies the person, but departs when the body dies. The Ba is immortal. A person's Ka is the element that fixes the person as an individual. In the instance of their Ba, a living, breathing animal. When the double spirits, the animal Ka and the spiritual Ba, live together in harmony, the individual lives, a healthy and rewarding life. Because both aspects of the person need nurturing, Egyptian medicine integrated physical and non-physical aspects in its techniques. Prayer, medicine, and magic together played equally important roles in healing the whole person. I thought that was amazing. And when you look at the duality of some of these gods that we're going to get into, goddesses, it's just amazing. You see how we need both for healing. You see how we need all expressions of the spectrum for healing. Right. The Egyptians worshipped a great number of gods and goddesses. Many deities could assist those in need of medical care. People called upon specific benign deities to prevent or cure diseases and wild animal attacks. They directed incantations to disease-causing malign demons or deities, telling them to leave the body. So they believed in possession. They believed in this very, very deeply. It was a part of their culture, and I don't know what it's like today. I have no idea. Do you?
In Egypt? Well, the culture is Muslim now. It's none of this. It's, typically monotheist.
Okay, that makes sense. So some Egyptian temples were associated with healing and healthcare. One example is the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, which I'm sure we're going to get into, where the buildings could be called infirmaries or santorias. Here the sick were cured through baths, regimens, and special diets, as well as religious prayers. So I have a little bit more to share once we actually get into these deities. But I just thought that's fascinating. Maybe other people knew that and understood it. I certainly didn't. When I think of medicine, I've just got Western medicine on my brain. Now, as studying to be a naturopath and working in naturopathy, it's, my mind is changing, obviously, and shifting. Being a Reiki master, a mindfulness master, like all those things have really shifted my understanding of medicine and health. But I just never thought it was that deep in Egyptian culture, and I'm really drawn to it, I have to tell you. Deeply drawn. It's like Chinese medicine, too.
Very similar.
Yeah, it's the whole person. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to you to lead us out on our first Egyptian goddess.
Very excellent. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
We're going to start with Hathor, and all the information on Hathor tonight is going to come from this excellent book by Leslie Jackson called Hathor, A Reintroduction to an Ancient Egyptian Goddess. Very extensive, thorough information. Highly recommend. Go buy it. Before we get into Hathor, I just want to mention, why are we grouping these three goddesses together? Hathor, Sekhmet, and Bastet. And here's the first section from the book Hathor, called In This, Her Name Of. The Egyptians didn't consider the deities to be individuals the way that people are, so the specific name wasn't always as important as their characters. This made it easy for them to merge and subsume deities without encountering any theological problems. In some cases, the deity could have two names or combined names, such as Hathor Sekhmet, and it's hyphenated there, Hathor-Sekhmet. In one section of the Bremer Rhine Papyrus, Hathor is referred to as, quote, in this her name of, variously as Bastet, Wadjet, and Sekhmet. In each case, this is used to emphasize one of her particular aspect. Gold, in this case, that means Hathor. Gold rises beside her father. In this, her name of Bastet is Hathor as the solar goddess. The cobra goddess, Wadjet, is linked to the vegetation, so Hathor makes green the two lands and guides the gods. In this, her name of Wadjet. When her savage protecting aspect is emphasized, Hathor, quote, has power over those who rebelled against her father, in that her name of Sekhmet. So definitely don't think of these gods and goddesses as individual beings. They're all descriptions of energies and functions of the universe. So within Hathor, Hathor herself has many different sides. She's known as a cow goddess, a solar goddess, a sky goddess, and a tree goddess. And these may all seem very different, but they all intermingle and combine to describe the goddess as a whole. They are not separate distinctions, and you'll see their themes all flow together. Some of her common epithets are the celestial cow, lady of the sky, mistress of the date palms, mistress of the southern sycamore, eye of Ra upon his disk, goddess of drunkenness, lady of all, lady of heaven, lady of horns, the great one, hand of Atum. So here's a little bit more of her iconography you can distinguish her by. The majority of Egyptian deities are only distinguishable by their animal heads or attributes such as crown or staff. Very few had distinguishing individual features. Hathor heads and the dwarf god Bes being the exceptions. Because of this, the iconography of the deity was very important so that the viewer knew who was being referenced. However, Isis and Hathor can be identical during the later period, and only accompanying hieroglyphs can distinguish between them. Hathor has two standard depictions, either as a cow or a woman. In both, she wears a crown of horns supporting the sun disk. In addition, Hathor is also shown as a Hathor head. This depiction is unique in Egyptian art, which emphasizes her importance. Now, I didn't grab a quote about the Hathor head, but the Hathor head is super interesting because if you look at Egyptian art, usually you only see gods and goddesses from their side profile, one side of their face, their left side or the right side. But it is very common to see this either in a stone carving or painting of Hathor from the front view. You could see her whole face, and usually with cow ears and smiling. And I thought that was very interesting. Yeah. So, continuing from the book Hathor by Leslie Jackson. Like all goddesses, Hathor can be portrayed as a beautiful, slender young woman. She usually wears a long wig bound by a fillet, which is a tie wrapped around the head to hold the hair in place. I've never heard that word before. Her sheath dress is often turquoise, reflecting her sky aspect, or red, or a combination of these colors. New Kingdom paintings often show Hathor in a red patterned dress with a long, narrow scarf tied at the neck. Red is associated with Hathor, particularly in her Sekhmet aspect, and at Edfu, she was called Mistress of the Red Cloth. Again, the original lady in the red dress. Thought that was very interesting.
Yes.
Like Hathor, red has a dual aspect in that it represents both life-giving and life-taking. Red is the color of the Nile during the flood, which gives it connotations of fertility and is also linked to menstruation and childbirth. Hathor has associations with all of these. Red is the color of blood, so linked with rage, injury, disease, and death, all associated with Sekhmet. Sekhmet's red is 100% Sekhmet's color, not shown with any other color. This also applies to why red is associated with many other goddesses we've mentioned: Lilith, Babylon, Hecate, etc. Now, whether depicted as a cow or a woman, Hathor wears a crown consisting of a pair of cow horns which support the red sun disk. And I mentioned cow horns. Most people don't think of cows having horns. Well, this Hathor is the wild cow. Cows only lost their horns after they were domesticated, and the goddess cannot be domesticated. Now, the sun disk is a reference to the myth of Ra being carried by the celestial cow, which we will get to. Hathor can also appear as a winged goddess. All other major goddesses, such as Isis, Nephthys, Mat, and Nut, could appear in this form. This signifies protection, particularly of the sun god. Goddesses are not depicted naked, with the exception being the sky goddess Nut. Hathor is occasionally shown nude as the goddess of the west on the floors of the late period coffins. This was to emphasize her sky aspect by aligning her more closely with Nut. Now, domesticated cattle were important to the Egyptians, but they did not choose the domesticated cow to represent Hathor. Instead, they selected the impressive wild cow, hence the horns, which lived in the marshes. The goddess cannot be domesticated. Even when the Hathor cow is depicted in the desert tomb scenes, she is usually shown in her home territory of the papyrus swamp. From the early 18th dynasty, the Hathor cow is often shown in a marsh setting, either with a papyrus or lotus. When shown with a lotus, the Hathor cow may relate to her Mehet Weret form, which is another goddess, the divine cow born from or personifying the Nun, the primeval chaos. It also alluded to her role as mother of Ra, who was born from the lotus. Both the cow and the lotus are symbols of birth and rebirth. A cow shown with papyrus probably refers to the Hathor cow suckling and protecting the Horus child in the marshes of Chemis. Now, earthy aspects of the cow. Cattle were of major importance to the Egyptian, providing them with draught animals, fertilizer, milk, meat, and other products such as hide and bones. They were also important psychologically, an inheritance from their Neolithic ancestors. A similar attitude can be seen in today's cattle herders of East Africa and the Sudan. The people were economically dependent upon herds that were largely maintained for milk, but also provided meat and hides. They acted as a living bank account and much prestige was attached to the size of a person's herd. Cattle were used for tribute, compensation, and the payment of taxes because they were so valuable. They were considered a very suitable offering to the deities. Now here, this is where Taurus should be taking shape in your mind. The extreme earthy aspects, plus we mentioned the Lady of Drunkenness, and we're going to continue into her celestial cow aspect, which is, it seems contradictory. It's like, what do you mean a cow of the stars, a cow in the sky? And it starts getting spiritual, and then you remember the Hierophant is Taurus. So I'm going to continue. The celestial cow. During the pre-dynastic period, the link between cows and the sky had been firmly established, as seen on the Gerzian and the Nakada II palettes, which show a cow's head with stars. By the end of the pre-dynastic period, the cow had become the divine symbol of creation, fertility, and rebirth with a strong stellar connections. It was the spiritual side of Taurus. It could even be considered an embodiment of the Milky Way. The celestial cow straddles the earth, her legs marking the cardinal points. Her belly is the sky, and she carries the sun disk between her horns. The long curved horns of the early breeds of domestic cows do suggest the crescent moons, although the Egyptians did not have a lunar goddess until the Greco-Roman period. The connection between the cow and the sky might have appeared obvious to the Egyptians. Cattle were important in Egypt, which was a reflection of heaven, so there must have been cattle in both the afterlife and the sky. That's typical as above, so below. When the Egyptians worshipped a cow goddess, it is likely that they placed her in the sky or heaven, as this is where most humans locate their deities unless they specifically belong to the earth or underworld. They may have been the merging of a mother cow goddess and a celestial cow goddess at an early stage, but on that we can only speculate. The five-pointed hieroglyph star adorns the body or dress of Nut when she is represented as a woman. There seems to be a similar idea with the trefoil and quatrefoil designs on the hide of the Hathor cow, which can be seen as an imitation of the natural spotting of cows. Did such markings on the wild cow suggest the stars and thus point to a celestial link? The celestial cow goddess is also connected to the primeval ocean, the pre-creation waters of the Nun. These waters surround the earth, but both above, in the sky, and underground, and can take the form of a great cow. When the Creator arose from these waters, creation began. In this form, the Hathor cow is aligned with Mehet Weret, the cow goddess, whose name means the Great Flood. Since you can see Taurus, I mean, is Taurus screaming through to you? Because to me, this is just screaming Taurus at me. I need a second opinion.
Yeah, I saw that too. And then as I dug a little deeper, I saw her attributed. She isn't one of, Hathor isn't one of the main Egyptian astrology signs, but Bastet is, and so is Sekhmet.
Right. I don't mean officially she is Taurus.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know
you see the archetype of Taurus here, right?
I do. It was strange to me that she didn't find a place on the zodiac wheel, is all I'm saying. Right. Yeah, I have Taurus here, but I saw her attributed May 26th to June 24th somewhere, and I didn't write down my source, but that put her in Gemini, and I had a question mark next to it on my notes, which would make her air and not earth.
Right. So all these there's so many details across culture that are going to be differing, but the theme here is Taurus, and this is why I say Taurus. This researching Hathor has made me change the way I see Taurus. I see Taurus as the cow now, not the bull. And on top of everything about Hathor, Taurus is a fixed sign. Fixed signs are feminine. So just based on that, why wouldn't it be the feminine animal? And then seeing Hathor, the cow, exhibit Taurus traits so fully, I can't help but see Taurus as the cow now.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also something I ran across that tied it to celestially the Big Dipper.
Interesting.
The Great Bear, so to speak. Asia Minor, Asia Major. Both of those, the Little Dipper and the Big Dipper. Yeah.
Right.
That those are tied to her as well, and it's in the Milky Way because of the milk that she provided from the cow.
That's a good connection right there.
Yeah, so I mean, that was kind of all connected together out there too.
All right, so continuing. Hathor as a sky goddess. Hathor is the lady of the sky and the mistress of the northern sky. There are three definitions of the sky to look at here. The blue diurnal sky through which the sun passes, the night sky studded with stars, and the less tangible concept of the cosmos or universe. The concept of Hathor as a celestial cow has been covered. So the Egyptians had various ways of depicting the sky, but they're always viewed as goddesses. The three main celestial images are the sky as a sea or a river upon which the solar bark sails, the sky as a cow, and the sky as newt arched over the earth. Hathor's name literally means domain of Horus. Horus being the sun god, his domain is the sky. In some texts, Horus the Elder is identical to Ra, and Hathor is said to be Ra's daughter, mother, and wife, variously in different texts over time. So here we begin to see she's very closely connected with the sun. That is why she's just referred to as gold in that first section. Any investigation of Hathor in this role as a sun goddess is closely entwined with the sun god Ra, as she is his mother, daughter, and partner. Whatever Hathor's association with Ra, it is said that she loves Re. Hathor's triple relationship with Ra is a way of expressing the idea that Hathor represents a divine energy and potency which is essential to the life of the sun god. She continually renews him, but he also generates the energy needed for creation to survive. One cannot exist without the other. And so essentially, Hathor is the female half of the sun, which, if you want to use the metaphor of a lover, the metaphor of a daughter, the metaphor of a wife, they're all female counterparts. It's not meant to be incestual. It's more of a metaphor. As the mother of Ra, as a sky goddess, is an easy progression for Hathor to become the mother of the sun god. She births him, honored by Hathor, who nurses the dawn, quote, protects and accompanies him on his daily journey, welcomes him at the evening, and provides the sky through which his solar bark can sail. Quote, hail to you, Re, the arms of your mother protecting you daily, every day. That's from Egyptian solar religion, New Kingdom Asman. From a hymn to the sun from the tomb of the chapel of Horemheb, 18th dynasty, is, quote, adoration of Ra, the young one in the Aten, within the arm of your mother Hathor. Aten is a sun disk in this context. Hathor can also be seen as the mother of the sun god in her aspect of the celestial cow who lifts the newly born Ra out of the waters of the Nun. She can also be viewed as the primeval lotus from which the child sun god emerged at dawn. Hathor is the mother of all the child gods such as Nefertem, Ihi, and Harsomtus, whose birth celebrates self-renewing cosmos. Hathor is associated with the dawn and the dawn bark because she gives birth to the sun. Quote, the beauty of your face glitters when you rise, O come in peace. One is drunk at your beautiful face, O gold Hathor. The dawn and early morning sun were gentle and welcoming after the dark night before and the burning intensity of the midday sun. Hathor, the lady of the evening, is associated with the evening bark as she receives the dying setting sun into her arms and also nurses him. An evening hymn to the setting sun refers to offerings to Ra and, quote, Hathor who suckles in the dusk. So as the partner of Ra, Ra was considered the creator. Heliopolitan theology, and this is an important distinction because there's not one single Egyptian theology, because things were so centered around city-states. Very often city-states have different myths, different creation myths involving different gods and goddesses. So specifically in Heliopolitan theology, the stimulus to this creation, the universe, is his female counterpart, Hathor. When she is referred to specifically as an aid to creation, she is called Ayusas. She, quote, she comes who is great. In Ayunu, the city of the sun, there is a prominent place in the sacred precinct of Ra for the sun goddess in creation as Hathor, Ayusas, and Nebethetepet, lady of the field of offerings. Ayusas and Nebethetepet were viewed as a single deity until the end of the Middle Kingdom. After this, they are sometimes shown as separate goddesses to emphasize the two aspects of abundance and growth. The Harris Papyrus has a painting of these two goddesses side by side with two aspects of the solar creator, Atum Ra Harakati. Doing my best with names. Daughter of Ra, and the eye goddesses. Hathor is the daughter of the Lord of All, who came forth from his body, preeminent in the day bark. Hathor's main relationship with Ra is as his daughter, and it is here that we see a lot of her Sekhmet persona. So the most common reference to Hathor is usually Ra's daughter. There are less records surviving that write about Hathor being the partner and the mother, and much more the daughter, to make that clear. As his daughter, she is usually referred to as the Eye of Ra, and she is the sun disk, the Eye of Ra upon his disk. It is Ra's love for his daughter that inspires him to cross the sky each day. Without Hathor's assistance, there would be no sunrise each morning. Ra exalts without ceasing. His heart rejoices when he joins with his daughter. He swims the firmament in peace. And I thought that was really nice. Like, sure, this is masculine, but it can't move across the sky without his love for his daughter.
Right.
So that's very balanced. And that kind of gives me the hint where they see things more as a whole. I think from this, the Egyptians are more likely to see the masculine and feminine in everything rather than assigning certain things to masculine and certain things to feminine.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was interesting.
Well, and they also, a lot of them interchange. The god can be in male form, or the god can be male form, or the god can be in female form.
Right. And we see this in Hindu theology too, where basically the god and goddess are essentially a unit. Like, they can't really do anything without their other half.
Mm-hmm. And it just represents duality. That's all I see it as, is trying to represent duality. And when we do away with duality and we have to have it just one direction, one way,
right? All things in all things. I mean, if you extend as above, so below, this is what this means. It's a hollow fractal universe. Now, think about it. If you've ever watched the Mandelbrot sequences, the videos where it looks like one pattern and it zooms in, it zooms in, it zooms in, and then all of a sudden you're seeing the same pattern over and over again.
Yeah.
That is a true extension of as above, so below. So whether you're looking at the sun, you're going to see all things within the sun. Whether you're looking at the moon, you're going to see all things within the moon. And this is reflected in Kabbalah too, where each sphere on the tree of life contains every other sphere within that sphere, but it is in the flavor of the sphere encompassing it.
And that is beautiful.
Right. So that is one of the deeper meanings of as above, so below, if you really extend it out. So, continuing. Hathor as the tree goddess. At first glance, there seems little that connects Hathor as a sky or cow goddess to the tree goddess, but the epithet of mistress of the sycamore is a very old one. Egypt was a land with few trees, so they were a distinctive and welcome part of the landscape. The sycamore fig, Ficus sycamoris, is the tree most associated with Hathor. The sycamore was once widespread in Egypt, but it is now confined to gardens. It only grows in the wild in Sudan, and it is a large tree with an erect trunk and spreading branches, and its canopy can be up to 36 meters, which is 118 feet in diameter. So that's a huge spread of shade. In the largely treeless land, it would have been a very striking tree, and the canopy would have formed a natural sacred space which was shady and cool. There are many references to the deceased sitting in the shade with Hathor, or in the shade of her tree. The sycamore's fruit is a type of fig, which is a moist fruit providing both food and liquid. Classical writers said that it produced more than one crop a year. This bounty was probably a major factor in its association with the celestial tree, which provides never-ending nourishment for the deceased. The Egyptians produced an opiate from the sap of the sycamore, which they called bezbez. And this is really interesting to me because I tried to look it up and I could not find a shred of information on the Egyptians making opiate from the sap of the sycamore tree. I couldn't find, usually if you look up the alkaloids in a certain plant, it will tell you. I couldn't find any information of any opiate in the sap of the sycamore. I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying, why can't I find this information? Is it hidden? Is it forgotten? I don't know where her source is. But anyway, if you have information on that, I want to know. That was just personally interesting to me. So this opioid they produced from the sycamore was used in pain-killing drinks, amongst other things. Some objects, such as spoons and bowls, are decorated with two figures of the god Bez, who is closely linked with Hathor. This may have been a pun on Bezbez. Both the fruit and the seeds produce a milky white liquid. This is the milk of the sycamore, would have given an immediate association with the nursing Hathor cow. So she is, her most common tree epithet is Lady of the Sycamore, but being there are only really a few tree species in ancient Egypt, she kind of became associated with all of them. So, other trees. Hathor is associated with other trees, and there are references to her as mistress of the date palms. The date palm, Phoenix dactylifera, was sacred to Ra probably because its ray-like crown of branches looks like the sun's rays. The Ished or Persea tree, Mimusops larifolia, was assisted with Hathor and the sun god and with the horizon. In a letter from Thebes, the sender commends the recipient to various deities, including Hathor of the Persea tree. The Persea ripens just before the inundation, and so it was linked to its fertile powers, and through that to Hathor. There's also reference to myrrh trees. May you sit under the branches of the myrrh tree near Hathor. This is probably due to her association with incense and with the land of Punt. Hatshepsut, 18th dynasty, had the following inscribed in her tomb. Quote, I sought an abiding place and found it in Punt. I built a house there on the hillside where my mother resides beneath her sycamores. She sent a very successful expedition to the land of Punt, which came back laden with exotic treasures. An inscription at the temple of Dendera refers to Hathor as the Lady of the Acacia. At the temple of Ra in Heliopolis was an acacia tree that grew on the, quote, high sand, which was a representation of the primordial mound. It was said death and life are enclosed by the acacia. As Hathor is the daughter of Ra, it is no surprise to find one of her sacred trees next to his main cult temple. And of course, because she was a tree goddess, there were sacred groves and tree cults. Fun stuff. Have tree spirits. In Western Europe, they are known as dryads. The presence and permanence of trees engender this feeling. It was a short step from tree spirit to tree goddess in the tree poor lands of Egypt. Because they were so rare, trees were very much appreciated. They provided food and shade and would have added a spiritual ambiance to the area. Precious and sacred, they could easily be viewed as kindly and approachable goddesses. Egypt did not have the dense, dark forests which the northern Europeans had to contend with, and which often gave rise to ambivalent or hostile forces and beings. Even the word shade had a different meaning for the Egyptians. To us, shadows can be as sinister and threatening, not comforting, and to be in the shadow of someone implies inferiority, not protection. Remember those quotes we just mentioned about being in the shade of Hathor. You know, it's not like Hathor is overshadowing you. Think of it in the context as you're in the desert and you're really, really hot and you find one tree and you look around to north, south, east, west. You don't see anything except this one tree. and you can get some shade and rest underneath it. Growing on the edges of deserts and wetlands, trees would have been a distinctive part of the landscape as well as a marker of liminal places. Liminal places! To me, that just jumps out. Hecate!
Yeah.
Those in-between places where the landscape changed and the veil separating the spiritual world was thinner. The presence of trees also marked the presence of water. For life outside the Nile Valley, this was a critical factor, hence the association with the sycamore providing water for the deceased. In the pre-dynastic period, tree goddesses and cults were purely local, but very early in the dynastic periods, they became associated with some of the national goddesses. We no longer have the names of these local tree goddesses. Hathor became the dominant tree goddess and assimilated most of the other tree goddesses. There is no evidence of tree gods. Tree cults were probably widespread, and as the dynastic period progressed, almost every nome had at least one sacred grove. Temple gardens were also very important for providing offerings in the form of bouquets, garlands, and branches. This tree in the afterlife. The sycamore is an important emblem for Hathor in her afterlife role. As well as the sacred sycamores on the eastern horizon, it was believed that another tree, the sycamore of the western horizon, grew at the edge of the desert at the entrance to the afterworld, where it provided shade and food to sustain the newly deceased. So the sun rises in the east, that's birth. The sun sets in the west, they associated the west with death and the afterlife. So Hathor is the guardian of this tree. In tomb paintings and funerary texts, vignettes and the deceased are often shown sitting in the shade of the sycamore. The Egyptians viewed the afterworld as a hazardous place where the deceased would need to find food, water, shelter, and protection. In the same way as sycamore trees growing at an oasis in the desert provided shelter and refreshment for the traveler, the Hathor sycamore in the afterworld provided this for the deceased. Now this is shouting to me, Hierophant, because it's all about help from a spiritual lens. Anyway, continuing. Having eaten the celestial fruit, the deceased would be ensured of life after death. This is in contrast to the Old Testament, where the celestial fruit brings suffering and death. Eating the food of the afterworld might help to anchor the deceased there. Indeed, it might be necessary to stop them from wandering back through the veil to interact too freely with the living. We see this concept in Western beliefs with the idea that eating food in the fairylands or in the realm of the dead will bind you to that place. The Egyptians had a terrible fear of eating feces and drinking urine in the afterworld. That was strange. Anyway, and there were many spells in the funerary texts to prevent this dreadful fate. Thankfully, we have the Tree of Hathor. A spell from the coffin text reminds the deceased where they will find safe and nourishing food. Where is it granted to you to eat? Under the branches of the sycamores. The New Kingdom tomb of Nakht at Thebes has a painting of a sycamore goddess wearing the hieroglyph for tree as a crown and holding a lotus, who offers a grapevine to the deceased Nakht. In the tomb of Userhet at Thebes, a similar relief shows Userhet sitting with his wife and mother under a sycamore tree laden with fruit, and the sycamore goddess standing in front of them. That's everything I have on Hathor.
Okay. I have a couple things I want to add there. Something that was really interesting to me when I looked at her in different places and cross-referenced and, spent time just trying to figure out who she was, because she's completely foreign to me. So it's the first time I've heard these names, except for Bastet. I've heard her, but Hathor and Sekhmet, I have not. In my cross-referencing, I saw this over and over and over, in that she was very earthbound. She was the goddess of many things, but music, dancing, fertility, pleasure, protector of women. Men worshipped her. Priests and priests followed her. Like, she had a following. It was a big deal. She was seen as the mother archetype, no doubt about it. She also was the patron of cosmetics. And wearing cosmetics was seen as a form of worship. Or offerings of mirrors or cosmetic palettes to her were common. Fascinating, each year her statue would be carried in a boat to Edfu, to be reunited with Horus. A festival celebrating their union would then begin. And that's from EgyptianMuseum.org, where I got that on her. Another thing I wanted to bring in is from the book on ancient healing that I referenced earlier. He states another deity people turned to for healing was Hathor. So she wasn't just representative of all these things, but she also was seen for deep, deep healing. And I would think reconnection to earth and grounding in the mother, and reconnection to yourself, right? A sky goddess and the goddess of love, marriage, and motherhood. She was shown in art as a woman when relating to her role as sexual partner, or as a cow when in her role as a nurturing partner. I thought this was crazy. Sometimes as a cow, she is portrayed with the pharaoh suckling at her udder. Signifying that she has this nourishment beyond just children, right?
Well, we should also recognize this as propaganda. I mean, if a president today said, "I am the son of God," you would say, "No, you're being a psycho." So we should also recognize this is propaganda from the government at the time. Yeah, the pharaoh was the leader of Egypt. The pharaohs creating images of, like, it was a very common thing for pharaohs and queens to claim themselves as the sons and daughters of gods and goddesses. And it's one thing for me and you to do that because we relate to them so heavily. But I imagine if a leader of a country today said they were the son of God, I mean, you would be reviled.
So you think that what I read was propaganda?
Yeah. Like, if you bring it into today, the pharaoh was the leader of the country, claiming they are the son of a goddess. If the leader of any country today said they were the son of God, you would laugh in their face and think they're a psychopath.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Like, it's one thing for me and you to say that we're a son or daughter of a god or goddess that we relate to and, like, genuinely love and worship, but I don't think that's what the pharaohs and royalty were doing.
Well, she's portrayed. It isn't that it actually happened. It's just that she's portrayed.
Yeah. Portrayed by who? You think that, portrayed by who? I mean, it was royalty that was creating most of the artwork. Most of the artists at the time worked for royalty.
Right, I see what you're saying. The Egyptians tried to neutralize dangerous forces such as poisonous scorpions with kindness. If the goddess who controlled the poison was treated well and given a great deal of respect, she could be convinced to use her powers against scorpion bites. Some healers held the title one who has the power over the scorpion goddess. They tried to prevent and cure all sorts of stings and bites by persuading gods such as Sekhmet. So I find it fascinating. They really believe this. Like, this was real to them.
Oh, yeah. It
was very, very real. Do I have anything else on her? I think it's interesting that you mentioned the Eye of Ra, and that's a title shared with Bastet and Sekhmet. They're all called the Eye of Ra. There's just something similar with that.
Yep, they're all daughters of Ra.
Right.
Because they're all essentially the same, as we mentioned. They're just different parts of the same character, just using different names.
Different expressions.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, what is it? Maiden Mother Crone, right? It's the same woman. It's just different stages and expressions.
Right. Similar.
Okay. That's all I had.
So, Sekhmet. Sekhmet, the lioness. This is the angry aspect of Hathor. Angry, violent. When the sun is too hot, basically. This is Sekhmet. So, I'm going to be drawing from two books, which I'll mention again. On Sekhmet, one is Sekhmet and the Way of the Five Bodies by Robert Masters, and the second one is Sekhmet and Bastet by Leslie Jackson, same author as the previous one on Hathor. Excellent books. Go buy them. So, interestingly enough, most gods and goddesses have a list of titles, epithets that are more or less biographical. There's a legend that Sekhmet has 10,000 names, and only a certain amount of them are known to her, a certain amount of them are known to the gods and goddesses, a certain amount are known to her priests, and there are 500 names, quote, for the people. Well, back then in ancient Egypt, only 100 of those names for the people are known today. And here are the ones that jumped out at me the most, or the most important. Sekhmet, Great One of Magic, Mother of the Gods, one who was before the gods were, Lady of the Place of the Beginning of Time, Eye of Ra, Eye of Horus, Wanderer in the Wastes, the Source, Sovereign of Ra, her father. I thought that was interesting because she's not her father's property, which was unusual in the ancient world. Maybe if you go far back enough, it's not unusual. Anyway, Lady of the Scarlet Colored Garment, also Sekhmet, as we covered before, very Babylon Lilith. And there are some more Babylon Lilith-esque titles that jumped out at me. She is the enrapturing one, the giver of ecstasies, satisfier of desires, inspirer of males, lady of intoxications. So she's beginning very much to seem like a Lilith Babylon type character, the more ferocious, the more sexual side of the feminine. Other titles, Opener of Ways, reminds me very much of Hecate the Gatekeeper, Lady of the Magic Lamp, extremely similar to Hecate the Torchbearer, Guide and Protectress from the perils of the underworld, and this is exactly what Hecate does with her torch in the myth. Lady of Transformations, and Lady of the Many Faces. Victorious one in battles, overcomer of all enemies, Lady of the Bloodbath, Great One of Healing, Destroyer by Fire, Lady of the Waters of Life, Goddess of Love, Devouring One. And that last group, very contradictory on purpose. Battles, bloodbath, healing, fire, water, life, love, violence. Why so contradictory? This quote is from the Leslie Jackson book. Sekhem is the original power that arose at first time, the instant of creation which drives creation. This is Sekhem, not Sekhmet. Sekhem. It is heat, light, fire, and especially life-giving energy of the sun. The goddess Sekhmet is the divine and visible representation of Sekhem, and she embodies the primeval energies in both their negative, destructive, and positive protective forms. We tend to characterize protective energy as good, but often the outcome depends on your point of view. Are you the one being protected or protected against? In most cases, we're not talking about a power of two separate entities which are either good or evil in intent, but range on a continuum of the same power. Heat will keep you alive until it reaches a certain temperature, and then it will start to kill you. There is no malicious intent, just a biological and physical fact. Two opposites can be complementary. The Egyptians were fascinated by apparently contradictory forces and how they could be reconciled. This reminded me of another Hermetic law, the law of polarity. Everything, and I'll quote this here, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. Yes, the sun keeps you alive until it's too hot and starts to kill you, etc., etc. This is the reason for all the contradictory names, the contradictory character. How could Sekhmet, the Lady of the Bloodbath, be the same as the loving, gentle Hathor? This is why. Law of polarity. So, here we continue through the Leslie Jackson book. Although her aspects of healer and destroyer appear contradictory, they are in reality complementary and essential for the protection and maintenance of creation. The myths tell of the struggle between the negative and positive elements of the universe, which need to be reconciled so that order can be imposed on chaos and life can arise from the inanimate. I'm about to read one of the favorite myths I've ever read, and it's Hathor. Hathor Sekhmet is the main character. Now, this telling of the myth comes from the Robert Masters book, Sekhmet and the Way of the Five Bodies. So, this is the myth of the destruction of mankind by the goddess Sekhmet. In this myth, particularly recorded by sculptures made on the walls of the tomb of Seti, humans entered into a conspiracy to overthrow the gods. They blasphemed against Ra. King of gods and men, and heretical priests and magicians plotted ways to turn against the gods for their destruction, using those very powers the gods have given to men that they might flourish and grow great upon the earth. Ra, hearing of this plan, called to meet with him the most ancient and potent deities, those who had been with him in the primeval waters before the time when with his eye, the sun, he had made life. The gods counseled together, and it was decided that Sekhmet, the force against which no other force avails, should manifest on the earth and quell the rebellion. Sekhmet would manifest and punish all those who held in their minds evil images and imagined wicked plots. Then that part comes off very Leo to me, very righteous. Then Sekhmet walked among men and destroyed them, and drank their blood. Night after night, Sekhmet waded in blood, slaughtering humans, tearing and rending their bodies, drinking their blood. The other gods decided that the slaughter was enough and should stop, but they could find no way to stop Sekhmet, who was drunk on human blood. As the carnage went on, the gods recognized that Sekhmet, her rage sustained by intoxication, would implacably proceed with the killing until the last human life had been extinguished. Then Ra had brought to him from Elephantine certain plants which have been said to be of the Somnolnern family, and which can be brewed as powerful mind-altering drugs. Those plants, possibly also opium or hemp, were sent to the god Sekhti at Heliopolis. Sekhti added these drugs to a mixture of beer and also human blood until 7,000 great jugs of the substance had been made. Again, 7, important to Sekhmet, Hathor, Babylon. 7 jumped out at me. Anyway. The jars were taken to a place where Sekhmet would pass and there poured out onto the ground, inundating the fields for a great distance. And when Sekhmet came to the fields and perceived what she thought to be blood, she rejoiced and drank all the liquid. Then her heart was filled with joy, her mind was changed, and she thought no more of destroying mankind. After that, Ra addressed Sekhmet as the one who comes in peace, praising the beauty and charm of the goddess. The occasion was afterwards celebrated among humans by a feast at which beautiful girls prepared a beverage containing the drugs which had been administered to the goddess. These girls, serving as priestesses of Sekhmet, participated then with male celebrants in an orgiastic festival held in Sekhmet's honor. One of the most famous of these was the festival held at Dendera in the month of Thoth. And the most important aspect of this gathering was the experience made possible by the drinking of the substance thought to be identical, save for the human blood, with that which was prepared for Sekhmet by the gods. Such orgiastic festivals were also held after battles with the hope of pacifying the goddess's more destructive nature. People danced, played, and shook the sistrum, celebrating Sekhmet as beautiful, brilliant, and adorable to soothe her wildness. Sekhmet came eventually to represent the ecstasies of love. Wow, there's a lot here. So generally, you can see Sekhmet is the archetype of the fiery woman you don't want to cross. When Shakespeare said, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, it was a Sekhmet, Lilith type of fucking woman. And also, drugs save the day. You're not going to hear any myth like that in modern times because it wasn't, drugs bad. It's plants of the earth. That's what they do. They fill people with fucking joy. Did you have any thoughts on that?
When you were talking about the revelry and, all that going on, the drinking and the partying, I just saw before me the golden calf, which Hathor has been referred to. And the people of Egypt, which were actually Israelites, right? They came from Egypt, but they were waiting for Moses to come down from the mountain, and he was taken forever. So they started partying and having this wild. Have you seen the Ten Commandments?
No, but yes, I have, but I know what you're talking about. They were worshiping the golden calf as he was up there.
Yeah, it just brings a whole new light on that whole scene.
Yeah,
how I could see how the main monotheistic God, Father Abraham, would be a little pissed off about that,
Yep, and of course in church they didn't teach us that was Hathor. They're just like that's not God. Don't worship it.
Right.
So,
yeah, it seems like that we've been born with a lot of drive and a lot of instinct and a lot of just natural tendencies that have to be kept in a Saturn box in order to fit into this world. And if you don't fit into that box and you have any celebration outside of that, it's considered taboo.
Yeah. It's a shame.
And again, I'm not advocating, listen, people don't take that the wrong way. I'm not saying go out and, have a wild, crazy orgy and drunkenness and all that, because I understand what can come with that. I get it. But it was a different time, man. We have to really look at that. It was a totally different time. We've really come a long way since these days.
So, to me, are you done with your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have some things on Sekhmet, but keep going. I'll wait.
Yeah, to me, Sekhmet screams at me Babylon/Lilith and Leo. And here is another connection. On the card representing Leo, which is strength, and the Raider Waite deck shows a woman and a lion. And in the Thoth deck, the goddess Babylon herself is riding upon a 7-headed beast. And this card is also representing Leo. Mm-hmm. Now, given all these connections, the fieriness, the womanness, the love of altered states, to me, this is all shouting Leo at me. And along with Hathor making me think that Taurus should be seen as the cow, this is similarly making me think that Leo should be the lioness, not the lion. And also, similarly, Leo is a fixed sign also, and the fixed signs are feminine. And also, we should mention, in one version of this myth, it is Hathor who is named to take care of the human problem. But as she goes to Earth, she transforms into Sekhmet when she starts acting violently. And this more clearly illustrates how they are one and the same.
Yeah, and just a sidestep on saying the fixed signs are feminine, not according to Western astrology.
Oh man, we have different information.
We have the fixed signs. Let's start out with Taurus in the 2nd house. Our next fixed sign is Leo in the 5th house. Our next fixed sign is Scorpio, definitely feminine, in the 8th house. Our next fixed sign is Aquarius in the 11th house. So you have Taurus is earth, which is feminine. Leo is fire, which is masculine. Scorpio is water, feminine, and Aquarius is air, masculine. So according to Western astrology, it's 2 of each.
Right. But within each element, I can't recall my source. I'll have to go track down my source on this. Fire is masculine, yes, but within fire, like we talked about before, all things in all things. The cardinal part of fire is the masculine part of fire. The fixed part of fire is the feminine part of fire, and the mutable fire is, the in between, the transitioning. So I get why you're saying attributing those genders to those signs because of their elements. But I'm going to have to go back to my source now, and we'll talk about it later. But within those elements, you also have the masculine, the feminine, and the neutral.
Yes, and that's where you're bringing alchemy into astrology in a different way, and I'm just going with straight astrology.
Different ways of looking at things.
Well, it's another layer. You're bringing in another layer, which is good.
Very interesting. Why I love this stuff. One last part, you mentioned about praying to the malevolent deities to get them to take away the disease or the sickness. Now, Sekhmet actually was one of these. Quote, of all the feline deities, Sekhmet is the only one seriously associated with healing. All deities can be invoked in healing spells and prayers, but Sekhmet was considered particularly effective, especially in the treatment of plagues and other epidemics. As she was considered responsible for inflicting them, she was the best deity to invoke to prevent and cure them. Yes. The Egyptians used the word Sunu as a title for physicians and healers and applied it to some deities. Isis, Thoth, and Horus are referred to as Sunu, but not Sekhmet for some reason. Was this because she controlled her demons, withdrawing them from the body rather than using healing magic to expel them? And that last part rings very true to me, as it is reminiscent of Hecate and Lilith very much as the mother of demons aspect.
Yeah, and in my writings or my research, I definitely came across her as a protector of the pharaohs, led them into warfare, but she also was a patron of physicians and healers. She could cure disease.
Yeah, and that was my last part. That was my last part on Sekhmet.
Yeah, you've pretty much covered everything. I don't have anything else that sticks out real strong, except she definitely was associated with misfortune, war, and destruction, and infectious diseases. Like, this was a big deal to them. And in petitioning her and doing the magic that they did, which I've not come across any Egyptian magic books. I suppose the Hermetica might go in there.
Well, the coffin texts, the pyramid texts, those are all spells. There's many, many books of Egyptian spells.
What I mean is it's just not anything I've ever looked at.
Oh.
But it's fascinating to me. It's
fascinating. They're out there.
Yeah, yeah. They had a cure with Sekhmet for every problem. And they believe that in order to stay on her good side, they would offer food and drink. They played music for her and burned incense. They would whisper their prayers into the ears of cat mummies and offer them to Sekhmet. They believed that this was a direct connection to the deities and their prayers would be answered. There was a temple built for her, also known as the Temple of Mute, by the last female pharaoh, and I can't remember her name, but she built a temple for her. And kings and warriors were known to call her name in battle. She is known as a divine symbolism of feminine power. With that fire, she reminds me of Pallas a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Yeah. That's all I have on her.
Thank you very much. So, Bastet. Now, Bastet is the house cat to Sekhmet the lion. Bastet is, in a sense, a pacified form of Sekhmet, similar to Hathor. So, quote from Leslie Jackson's book, Sekhmet and Bastet. Today, Bastet is widely known and revered as a cat goddess. but she was originally the lioness-headed daughter of Atum, the first daughter of the All-Lord. Having a similar character to the other feline goddesses, she doesn't seem to have been as aggressive, possibly having a less dominant solar aspect. In many ways, the story of Bastet parallels that of the myth of the distant goddess and the domestication of the cat. Because she is so well known, Bastet is a deity who is immediately associated with the cat. Other goddesses can be represented as cats or cat-headed, but this is less common. In some vignettes of judgment scenes from the Book of the Dead, there is a cat-headed woman. She is usually nameless, but some authors suggest that she is Mapdet. Mut and Hathor are associated with cats, but they are not cat goddesses. The cat's late arrival meant that most feline deities were too strongly associated with the lion to move towards cat imagery, right? Because cats were domesticated rather late. In later periods, Bastet was shown as either a cat-headed or as a cat. She is immediately recognizable in her cat-headed form and can appear as a cat, but not every cat is Bastet. There are many thousands of bronze statuettes of the cat-head Bastet, and most are small. Some have general inscriptions on such as, "May Bastet give life." Others are inscribed with New Year greetings or dedicated for a specific festival. Many just invoke the goddess and occasionally contain a request. They range in date from the late period to the Greco-Roman period. Most of these will have been votive offerings left at her temples. Excavations at places such as Saqqara and Bubastis have uncovered caches of such offerings. A number were dedicated by people with Greek names, hinting at her wide-ranging popularity. Recent excavation at the Temple of Heliopolis has uncovered a workshop with practice pieces and a bronze figurine of a cat-headed Bastet. Bastet holds a combination of sistrum, menat, or an Argus of Sekhmet. An aegis is the Greek word for shield and refers to the model of a broad collar surmounted by the head of a deity. This is normally one of the eye goddesses Hathor, Tefnut, Sekhmet, Mehit, or Bastet, but Isis is sometimes depicted. They had a protective function that are often placed on the prow and stern of sacred barks. One golden aegis had the head of Sekhmet, but she has pointed ears like a cat. Does this indicate her more benevolent aspect? Bastet is the only goddess who carries an aegis. Perhaps it alludes to her role as a pacified, benevolent form of Hathor or Sekhmet. Now, back to, as we mentioned, Bastet is most popular known as a cat goddess because she is more popular in the later period, and that was her form in the later period. But here we will trace her roots as the lioness. So, Bastet didn't take the role of the distant goddess, but was sometimes seen as her pacified aspect, usually in contrast with Sekhmet. Like all the lioness goddesses, she was the Eye of Ra who protects her father Ra, and was an aggressive protector. She could also be the knife-wielding cat fighting Apophis. Bastet displayed the same ferocity as the other feline goddesses, being invoked as a war goddess. Battle texts of Amenhotep II, 18th dynasty, describe his enemies being slaughtered like the victims of Bastet. Her dangerous aspect dominates in the coffin texts, the Book of the Dead, and in medicinal spells where the slaughterers of Bastet inflict plague at the end of the year. In some spells, the person identifies themselves as her son in an attempt to avoid catching the plague. Gifts such as small blue glazed flasks and amulets or statues of cats were exchanged at the new year, and the name of Bastet is often inscribed on them. One is inscribed, quote, "May Bastet give a happy new year to Pudobast." As Bastet and Sekhmet were associated with this dangerous period, it was appropriate to thank them once it had passed and a new year began. As an eye goddess, Bastet could be an agent of divine retribution. The story of Prince Setna comes from the late period. He becomes infatuated with Bastet Tabobu, the daughter of a priest. They meet in the temple at Memphis, and she makes him sign a deed handing over all of his possessions. In his blind lust for her eyes, he even lets her kill his children, Lilith. When Setna finally embraces her, he finds it has all been a dream, and he is lying naked on a highway. This was punishment for stealing a magical book from the tomb. Bastet Tabobu may have been a manifestation of Bastet. One of her original roles was to punish those who had offended the deities. Very righteous, very Leo, very similar to Sekhmet in her lioness. This is Bastet in her lioness form earlier on. In the Bremer Rhine papyrus, there is a statement, quote, "As to any servant who shall serve his lord, there shall be no profit of Bastet against him." We know nothing more about the priests of Bastet as agents of vengeance. In the pyramid text, she can be the protector, mother, and nurse of the king. A relief at Karnak shows a king taking part in ritual races in front of Bastet. Here she is called the ruler of the divine field, meaning Egypt. Bastet played a role in the afterlife, which is discussed later on. So here, early on in the early period, she is more or less interchangeable with Sekhmet, but here she starts to evolve. Before she becomes a cat, she is shown as a lioness with a cat next to her, or cats around her. So, well, as Bastet had both cat and lioness symbolism, both creatures can appear together to represent her, is usually in the form of a lioness-headed goddess accompanied by a cat. The lioness is also used to represent Sekhmet, showing the relationship between the two. One late period amulet depicts Bastet as a walking lioness-headed goddess with a seated cat. In the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, there is a statuette of Bastet as a seated lioness-headed goddess with a cat on her lap. A Ptolemaic amulet shows a lioness-headed goddess with a cat on each shoulder next to a mummiform Osiris with a cat at each side. Without an inscription, the goddess is impossible to identify, but Langton suggests that she is Sekhmet and wears a sun disk and the uraeus. There are also statues of a lioness-headed goddess with one or two cats on her head, her transition to the cat. It is not known when Bastet started to become associated with the cat, or even why. A 17th dynasty scarab with the name Bastet incorporating the hieroglyph of a cat is the first evidence of her association with the cat, but this might have been as her cult animal rather than implying Bastet as a cat. Very important epistemology, critical thinking there. Appreciate that. The earliest depiction of a cat-headed goddess who we know is Bastet appears on the 21st dynasty papyrus of Derpu, where she leads the deceased into the judgment hall. The domestic cat initially had no religious significance, and Bastet was well established as a lioness goddess. Was associating her with the cat a way of differentiating her from the other lioness goddesses, in particular Sekhmet, who had a very dominant personality. Bastet may have been seen as a less aggressive form of Sekhmet from the early periods, but until the cat was domesticated, there wasn't another creature who could represent her feline but friendly character. Certainly, the cat provided a good illustration of the gentler, pacified goddess compared to the angry goddess depicted in the form of a lioness. Hahower, Hathor was regarded as the gentler form of Sekhmet, so why was Bastet needed? This was partly geographical. In areas where Hathor was preeminent, she took the form of the pacified goddess, but in the delta, it was taken by Bastet. Although Hathor was an eye goddess, she wasn't particularly feline in aspect, unlike Bastet. As her iconography changed to more cat-like, Bastet was viewed as more benign. When the cat became widespread and popular, its religious and symbolic importance developed, and it must have become a symbol in need of a deity. Until the third intermediate period, Bastet always manifested in and was depicted in lioness form, although she was associated with the cat from the Middle Kingdom. She did not lose her lioness-headed form, and this continued to be used in temples, whilst her image for domestic religion changed into the cat-headed or cat form. The late-period Brooklyn papyrus describes a statue of Bastet as a statue of a woman with the face of a lioness. The cat form was obviously considered only suitable for domestic worship, a lesser form which didn't fully depict the goddess as she was officially viewed. Now that gets into the lion as a symbol of royalty. Also, the connection between the felines and the sun is important to mention, because in the myth where the sun god Ra, her father, always battles the chaos serpent Apophis. In one of their battles, Ra turns into a great, sometimes it's called a great cat or a tomcat, and goes after Apophis, eats Apophis. And also, it was noted that the wild cats in Egypt were very good at killing snakes. Now, this is why cats were associated with the sun. And to us, that might seem unusual because the Greeks associated cats with the moon, and that's cats are more active at night, etc., etc. But this is their point of view. This is what they saw in the world. So I thought that was interesting. As a cat goddess, as Bastet became increasingly associated with the cat, her character became more gentle and friendly. Did the character of the domestic cat influence how Bastet came to be perceived, or did she always have a gentler side and the presence of the cat emphasized it? I suspect the latter. In her angry aspect, she never seems as dangerous as Sekhmet. Certainly, the lioness traits of Sekhmet and the other goddesses are often absent. The childbearing and nurturing instincts are a dominant aspect of the later Bastet, and her fertility and fecundity symbolism is important. She was a protector of pregnant women and women in childbirth. She retains her protective role in line with the cat symbolism without the dangerous aspect inherent in the lion goddess. It is easy to see why she appealed to the ordinary people and became increasingly popular. In her cat form, she mingled with the people rather than having the more exclusive, remote association with lionesses and royalty. She may have been seen as a safer goddess in Sekhmet, which is fairly obvious, but she was also in competition with Hathor and especially Isis, who was in her ascendance during the late Greco-Roman periods. Bastet, the cat goddess, shows a number of traits reminiscent of Hathor. They have a number of shared aspects: love, fertility, motherhood, protection, and a love of the sensual in perfume, music, and dance. For some reason, Bastet is not associated with love songs, which were very popular. This was probably because Hathor had such a close association with love and sex, and Bastet only assumed these aspects at a later date. Bastet is the goddess great of festivity. Enjoyment of life isn't a totally new aspect for Bastet. A text from the 11th dynasty says, "So that you will be happier than the mistress of Bubastis," which is a reference to Bastet. So here are some more connections to Hathor and Sekhmet in the section called Alter Egos. The eye goddesses all have strong links to each other, and Bastet is usually seen as the pacified version of the eye goddess Hathor or Sekhmet. Hathor's sensual aspect connects her with Bastet, but she does not have the same relationship with Bastet as she does with Sekhmet. Hathor and Bastet can be complementary, though through some of their shared aspects. A hymn to Hathor in the papyrus Bremer Rhine says, "Gold, Hathor, rises beside her father, in this her name of Bastet." In the New Kingdom, Bastet could be associated with Mut of Thebes. In Bubastis, there was a triad of Atum, Bastet, and Horhenkenu, which is a version of Horus. Now, Isis assimilated many goddesses, especially during the Greco-Roman period, and Bastet was no exception. An inscription from the temple of Edfu states that the soul of Isis is present in Bastet, and in the Chaim Archaeology, Isis says that, "For me was built the city of Bubastis." As soon as Isis adopted the sistrum as a cult object, the connection between the two goddesses was emphasized by the cat imagery on these objects. The Greco-Roman Book of Hours refers to Isis-Bastet. Isis was identified as the Uraeus and the Eye of Ra in the hymns. Also, Sekhmet and Hathor were, and one hymn from her temple at Philae identifies her with Sekhmet to emphasize her warlike aspect. Overall, though, the lioness goddesses were not in keeping with Isis's character. Bastet, through her gentler aspects and her popularity with the ordinary people, was a much more suitable match. Got one last part on her, the silent one. With such a popular goddess as Bastet, you would expect to find a lot of primary source material about her, especially as her popularity peaked in the later periods where more evidence has survived. This does not appear to be the situation with Bastet. probably because she was favored by the ordinary people who left little written trace of their worship. The high volume of cat-related artifacts have to stand as a testimony to the Egyptians' love of her, the goddess of the people.
Yeah, they tend to connect her with protection of the crops and the slowing the spread of disease by killing the rodents.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They saw her more as the physical form of the goddess Bastet there, and therefore bringing pleasure and good health. And so she's often depicted with the head of a cat and a slender female body, unlike Bastet, who's shown a little bit differently. Also, most commonly in Lower Egypt, Bastet was found, which I think you alluded to a little bit earlier, but
yep.
It makes sense why she wasn't in certain regions as much as in others.
Right.
And due to her protective duties, I saw she was nicknamed Lady of the East, Goddess of the Rising Sun, and the Sacred and All-Seeing Eye. She is also known as the Goddess of the Moon and was thought to be the Eye of the Moon and the Eye of Ra. So she's still worshipped over there today, and her protection is believed by some to be cast over modern-day cats.
Interesting.
But there is something about a cat different than a dog, isn't there?
Very different.
Yeah. I mean, you just kind of sense they just know things.
Yeah. They have a consciousness like people.
Yeah, it's a different consciousness than dogs have. I'm not saying dogs don't have it. I think that they do, absolutely. It's just cats are different.
Very
it's a different
much so.
tapping in there.
Yeah. I really loved researching all of these three goddesses, and they go together so well. The Lady of Many Faces.
Mm-hmm.
As I go from culture to culture, oh, it's another face of the same lady I know. It's another face of the same lady I know. And that really gets my passion going for why I don't exactly know.
Right. Well, it's just fascinating to see these stories showing up in other cultures. When you look even at the Hebrew Jewish understanding, you've got Adam and Eve, right? Or Lilith was first. So you've got Sekhmet and Bastet, two different expressions of the feminine, just like Eve and Lilith.
Right.
And we need them both. Although I know it's hard for me. It was hard to really listen to all the violence as I was listening to some of the material and reading it. It was like, wow, it's just a lot of violence with especially Sekhmet, right?
Oh yeah. Don't cross a fiery woman.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
You'll get what's coming to you. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
Okay, that's right. That's right. You said it earlier. Yeah. Yeah, man, that's true. There's definitely a fire there, right? In her. I see Leo, but I also see the 8 card like you were talking about, and how, man, get that strength under control so you can harness it. So you can use the power instead of have it use you. Learn to use the power instead of have it use you.
Yeah. I would think women often have that effect on men, taming their animal, fiery impulses.
Yeah.
Right, that's Babylon riding the beast. She's in control.
Right.
That's on that same lust card representing Leo.
Exactly. That card fascinates me, the number 8. I often will pull that out when I'm facing a really difficult, I know it's just a difficult challenge time. I'll just pull that card out and set it out somewhere where I can see it throughout the day. You know, it definitely is a powerful card. I agree with you that it's definitely Leo. Also, she came up, I meant to say this, Sekhmet came up from July 29th to August 11th. That would definitely put her as a Leo. And August 30th to November 7th, that's a Scorpio.
Oh.
So fire that is fixed and water that is fixed.
Very interesting.
And then Bastet is not one of the 12, but Hathor is. No, Bastet is one of the 12, but Hathor wasn't in the main 12. Egyptian astrology list. And Bastet is July 14th through 28th, which would be Cancer. September 23rd through 27th, which would be Libra. And October 3rd through 17th. What they do is they divide up into the decans, the signs. They do a little bit differently than we do. I didn't go into all that, but so they believe that we are a mixture. And I guess to me, that's Sun, Moon, Ascendant too, right? The main three that make up a person astrologically. Main personality is Sun, the Moon, and the Ascendant. But I want to thank you for sharing your work on that. This was all new ground for me, and I've just been educated big time and feel like I've just, like, wow, what do I do with all this information? I'm definitely going to dig deeper and very interested in the magic and the books.
Right. And don't let the length of this podcast trick you into thinking you have an in-depth knowledge of any of these goddesses. I mean, combined, maybe I read 10 pages pulled from 3 books, which are maybe a combined 500 pages. And also, all the reading in the world is no substitute for direct practice, for contacting these goddesses yourself and invoking them and feeling their energy.
Make sure that you go in when you go to do your magic work, that you're not in a place of a depressed state or sad or really physically tired or just coming off an illness. You may say, well, that's when I need it the most. But that's often when maybe we'll be forgetful to do a step or take a protective measure that is super important.
That's what your local shaman's for.
Yeah, there you go.
And also, I wanted to mention I butchered the title of the Robert Masters book. The correct title is The Goddess Sekhmet Psycho-Spiritual Exercises of the Fifth Way. I could have sworn it was The Way of the Five Bodies.
Maybe wow, sounds like a fascinating book, though. Thank you.
Well, yeah, the book does cover the 5 bodies in the way the Egyptians saw them, and then also contains the myth on Sekhmet and some more information.
All right, well, that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
Nope, that is everything.
I hope that everybody has a happy winter solstice and Yule for December. However you celebrate, if you do Christmas, whatever you do, I hope that it's a time where you do some reflecting and take advantage of the energies that are coming in to support us and move into this new year on solid ground.
Have a good night.
All right. Good night.